From pickling and salting to smoking and drying, we've been finding different ways to make food last longer since ancient times. But by the 18th century, an efficient and truly effective way of preservation, canning, revolutionized the way we eat. Welcome to Yes Story. The process was invented after prolonged research by Nicolas Appert, a young chef from the region of Champagne of France in 1809, in response to a call by his government for a means of preserving food for the army and navy use. In 1795, the country was fighting battles in Italy, Netherlands, Germany, and the Caribbean, highlighting the need for a stable source of food for soldiers and seamen. France's leaders decided to offer a 12,000 franc prize through the Society for the Encouragement of Industry for a breakthrough in the preservation of food. Wow! Appert was determined to win and succeed. Appert's method was tightly sealing food inside champagne bottles, sealed airtight with an oddly effective mixture of cheese and lime. Appert's discovery built on earlier imperfect techniques, which either removed air or preserved food by heat but hadn't managed to do both. It was 50 years before Louis Pasteur was able to explain why the food so treated did not spoil. The heat killed the microorganisms in the food, and the sealing kept other microorganisms from entering the bottle. Appert's process was all the more amazing because it predated Louis Pasteur's discoveries of germ growth and sterilization. Canned food is also predated by around 30 years the can opener itself. The first metal canisters were made of tin-plated steel or even cast iron, with heavy lids that had to chisel open or stabbed through with soldiers' bayonets. Appert soon progressed from champagne bottles to wide-necked glass containers. The method consisted of tightly sealing food inside a bottle or jar, heating it to a certain temperature, and maintaining the heat for a certain period, after which the container was kept sealed until use. He believed it was the presence of air that led to spoilage, and many of his early experiments were dedicated to removing that element. In 1803, his preserved foods including vegetables, fruit, dairy, and fish were sent out for sea trials with the French Navy. Continuing with his experiments, Appert discovered that it was heat, not air, that kept pesky spoilage. By 1804, his lab had begun to experiment with meat packed in tin cans, which he soldered shut and then observed for months for signs of swelling. Those that didn't swell were deemed safe for sale and long-term storage. In 1806, the legendary gastronomist Gramont de la Reynière wrote glowingly of Appert that his canned fresh peas were green, tender, and more flavorful than those eaten at the height of the season. 3 years later, guess what? Yes, Appert was officially awarded the government's prize. That same year in 1810, Appert published The Art of Preserving Animal and Vegetable Substances, which was the first cookbook of its kind on modern food preservation. Oh, but unfortunately, his factories remained unprofitable though was innovative, and he died a poor man in 1841 and was buried in a common grave. By then, variants of his process were used to can foods ranging from New York oysters and Nantes sardines to Italian fruit and Pennsylvania tomatoes. In 1810, Peter Duran from England patented the use of tin-coated iron cans instead of bottles, and in 1812, the Englishman Brian Duncan substituted unbreakable tin for the glass. So, the tin can industry was born when Duncan built his first canning factory. By 1820, Peter Duran was supplying canned food to the Royal Navy in large quantities. European canning methods reached the U.S. soon thereafter, and that country eventually became the world leader in both automated canning processes and total can production. Gail Borden was the first to adopt this technology in the U.S. with the production of canned sweetened condensed milk. The availability of canned food played an important role in the 19th century, feeding the enormous armies of the Crimean War, the U.S. Civil War, and the Franco-Prussian War, and offering explorers and colonialists a taste of home and familiar lands. Following the global depression of 1873, U.S. exports of canned foods boomed. Who was behind that? The Campbell, Heinz, and Borden companies. In 1904, the Maxim's Machine Company of New York patented the double seam process used in most modern food cans. The canning process was very slow and labor-intensive when this method was begun, as cans were handmade. and took up to 6 hours to cook. This meant canned food was too expensive for ordinary people. Plus, the can opener wasn't invented yet, so those cans were a pain to open anyway. Today, a double-seam machine can safely seal more than 2,000 cans a minute, a long way indeed from Appert's pea-packed bottles. In the late 19th century, Samuel Kate Prescott and William Underwood of the U.S. set canning on a scientific basis by describing specific time-temperature heating requirements for sterilizing canned foods. These days were preoccupied with health fads, gluten-free eating, and vegan alternatives. Nearly 200 billion cans of food are produced in the world each year. It devotes about $8 billion industry to itself and creates 35,000 of jobs around the world. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, share, and like.